he's going to talk about this one. This is the one that was withdrawn from the auction. Okay, and Bob will explain why he thought it was questionable, and hopefully I think we're all going to learn a lot about all the different styles here. So this is the one that was withdrawn from the auction. Okay, so Bob,
what number is it?
it's a 164. So, but yeah, it was one that I brought in since I had all the auction stuff. So, all right.
All right, I'm going to try to do this as best I can. I don't have a formal outline, but as Darryl commented, this was the piece in the NIA benefit auction that was pulled because we weren't sure of its legitimacy. So I just kind of want to do a brief overview of all of this. This was focused on Hemingray. I know there's some Pyrex pieces down here and some other oddities that we'll talk about, but Hemingray Carnival glass, and Carnival glass is like a tin oxide that's applied to the glass when it's hot. So the glass has to be warm and hot for this tin oxide that's sprayed on it to adhere and become stuck to the insulator, we'll say. Seems to have been started around 1930 at Hemingray. Hemingray was making, besides insulators at that time, they were also making soda bottles and water bottles and all sorts of things of that nature. These two items here are a bottle that they patented in 1931, and it's a little hard to tell with the lighting, but you can tell they're two different shades. This one's darker, this one's a little lighter. Not sure if the Carnival that was applied was actually that different in color, or if some of it was wear from use, or wear from an insulator being out in the weather, or being cleaned too harshly. Scrub, 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 okay? So I just wanted you to see that all the Carnivals aren't going to necessarily be the same shade, and they could still be legitimate pieces. So these were patented in 31. There's 4 or 5 other bottles that Hemingray made that were Carnival glass, same vintage, 1931 on up. Obviously, Hemingray was bought by Owens in 1933. They continued the name, they continued the Carnival into the Owens years, but they seem to, in my opinion, not necessarily the NIA, but my opinion is they dropped off after 1935 to zero. So 1930 would probably be all these Aqua 230.1s, maybe early 31. The reason I come to that conclusion is because Hemingray switched their glass from aqua to ice blue, supposedly in 1931 as a requirement by Western Electric. The insulators were too dark, they wanted something clear. And they were already making bottles in ice blue. So they just naturally said, well, will this suffice for your insulator color? So these, I believe, the last 4 are mine. I believe they all came from the dump. I dug the last 4. And there's more than that, but all those aqua ones would be from the dump. And they vary, as you can tell, these back ones, can't even really tell they're Carnival anymore because it's been wearing off from being in the weather, unburied in ground. So this one didn't get affected too much, other than obviously the chips. So then, that would have had no date code. 1931, 32, even 33 probably didn't have any date codes on whatever. Glass factories usually shut down during the summer. Hemingway's contract was finalized in May of 33, so probably in the fall of 33, they added the 0 to the mold, or O, maybe for Owens. So you would have insulators that went from no date codes at all to ones with 0, and then in 34 they added the -4 and a subsequent period for 1935. So at that same time, Hemingray was experimenting and made insulators with these brass bushings. So this insulator had to be hot to get the Carnival sprayed onto it. If you were an unscrupulous person and wanted to post-carnivalize an insulator, if you carnivalized one with a brass bushing, 99% I think of the time you're going to crack the insulator. So in my opinion, brass bushed insulators that are carnivalized are legit. The TS series, these three, the CD118, the 142 and the 142-4, those were a contract for Western Union. They required these specific insulators to be sprayed with Carnival coating, a metallic coating, as you will. And their spec said they wanted to spray from the bottom up because they were most concerned about the petticoat and the internal threads and everything having the Carnival with tin oxide coating and not so much the dome. So you'll see all of those kind of have clearer domes. These should both be 1935 because that's when the spec was issued. So the end of production of Carnival. But again, they were under contract to make these in Carnival, so you shouldn't find one that's fake because none would have left the factory without their Carnival coating. That may make sense to everybody so far? So now what do we do about all the other stuff in between? I'll try to start down at that end and work this way. That first row of spools there are unembossed spools. I believe they're all from the dump. Most of them don't have the glass punched out of the top of them. Some have a brass sleeve in them, some do not. And they're all smaller diameter than a regular 518. I don't doubt the authenticity of those because I don't think any have been found in the wild, unless anybody can say you have. The next one is a full-size unembossed 518. I haven't seen that piece before, but again, I don't necessarily doubt the authenticity of that. So these are both unembossed. This was the small spool, this is the 518 spool. You can see the difference in size. You can also see how the top is not punched out on both sizes of these. This is a marked 518. You can also see the brass sleeve in this one.
Legit or non-legit?
We think they're legit. The next two, I sorted these. These next two are Hemingray 518 embossed on the bottom. These would be post 1935. Do you guys agree? Probably post-production. The Mickey Mouses. I had an hour and a half long conversation with somebody from West Chicago earlier this week. That old-time collector dealer claims that all the Mickeys are post-production because he did them, but he wasn't the first one that did them. He said there was somebody before him who did work for Owens, Illinois, but in Toledo, not Muncie. And he thinks those came out in the early 70s, 71 to 73, probably time frame, I'm guessing. This dealer did this later. And the date codes, all of those insulators do not have the date codes that would match a legitimate insulator, except for the first one by itself. It happens to be a wide groove, not a narrow groove like all those. I don't know that that matters. But this has no date code at all. So that would fall in the legit range until you look at chips. There's a chip here, and there was a flake here that appeared to have the metallic coating over it. That's one of the things you need to look for, is chips, scratches, dirt. If dirt's on top of the Carnival, that's hard to replicate, especially if it's like soot, like stuck on there.
We don't think that Hemingray Mickey's at the Carnival.
None have been found. I've been looking for one, and I was excited when I saw that till I saw the chips. We don't know that these were done by the gentleman in West Chicago. They might have been done by the guy before him. And I don't know what that gentleman might have made besides, or might have post-carnivalized besides Mickey's. The guy that carnivalized the Mickey Mouses used to work for St. Clair Glass in Elwood, Indiana. If you guys know the solid pour paperweights out there that look like insulators, and it's on the bottom it says St. Clair Glass, the guy that sprayed the Carnival on those had the knowledge to do those. Those were done in Wapakoneta, Ohio, because that's where the guy lived after St. Clair closed. D512s, again, brass bushed, dump piece, regular line production. I can see wear spots in the Carnival from either wire rub or what have you. Seems legit. There's a whole row of non-brass bush ones up here, all with the correct date code, all with what appear to be the correct date codes. So you got to look. I don't see any wear rubs on this one. I kind of do on this one. So you kind of got to formulate your opinion on how much money you want to shell out to buy these upon what you see in there.
For that
Can you give
one,
me
you're
that
looking
sticker?
at a date code of 1935 or earlier.
1935, correct date code. Looks to be 1935, the correct date code. Somebody moved some insulators on me. Still, again, both I think are legit. Look at the color range. Either no date code on this one or illegible. Probably legit, in my opinion. What do you guys think of this one? Hemingray front, 512 back, 7-Made in USA-0. Too new, 1940. Different profile too. This is the one that they skinnied it down from that big fat piece.
The older one has, the earlier one has years that were carnivalized.
Correct. This one was evenly sprayed all over to make a nice dark piece.
And that's the 1940 one?
Yep. I didn't bring my 513, but I'm glad Bill and some others brought theirs. I have a dump one. I suspect all these are dump. Brass bushed. 04 period. And do you know the provenance? It looks like a dump. There's a Carnival missing on part of it. That doesn't mean there aren't fake ones out there, but they're not. I haven't seen many 513s period, so. D510s, similar to the D512s. You got brass bush, you got unbrass bushed, you got ranges of colors. This is mine. No brass bushing. Look at how dark that is. Look at the dome. I don't know that I trust that that's legit, even though I own it.
Did they try
they spray from the bottom on all these? And then the top?
Well, the TSs, that was their spec. I'm not going to say they tried to spray all these from the bottom, because once I get to this, you'll see why. Again, though, this one has a little bit lighter dome. Seems to be the right date code and stuff. I don't see any wire rubs. There's a little nick that does not have Carnival on it. So that one's kind of a, use your best judgment. Ask if they know where it came from. D990, well, and then we have, obviously we have dump ones. Go ahead.
Fifth one up on the last row.
Here? 04.
Shiny.
It's pretty shiny. Does have a couple wire rubs. Is that yours?
No.
Look at it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think some of it is just variation in the coating and stuff. I think increases the chance that it's legit.
Yeah.
I think that,
So you think this one's legit? Your opinion? That's almost as dark as the one I think's fake. D990s, again, I didn't bring mine. I couldn't get to it in time. I don't really know much about the D990 history. There's some splotchiness to the coloring on this one, but there's also a nick in it that's not carnivalized over. The splotchiness I'm talking about is like drips that have collected on the bottom, like they sprayed a little bit too much.
good or bad?
I don't think they got too over anxious with the carnivalization. I don't think the drips are necessarily a good thing. This is a light one. This is like mine. This is an O all by itself. This is also an O by itself. Awfully consistent coloring. I think the chip on the base is carnivalized over. As far as I know, all the Hemingray 71s came from the dump. This is mine. Look at how dark the dome is. So they didn't necessarily spray this from the bottom up. They got the dome pretty dark. I can't say I've seen a fake one, but I can't say there isn't again. The 72 is mine. The Carnival's almost completely wore off. So you can see the base color of the ice blue I've been talking about. No date code at all. .252s. 04 period, smooth base. Kind of light. No date code round drips, and look at how dark and how light. Both dump pieces. No date codes at all, which kind of coincides with the one I lost a sticker on back here. But it's kind of dark. It's got a ping here, not carnivalized over. A big chip, not carnivalized over. So, these could very well be all legitimate, all of these, although the smooth base is an outlier. Have you ever seen a smooth base dumper? This might not be legit, even though it's got the 04 period. All of them we found here are all round drips. The chip does not appear to have Carnival on it. So I'm not going to tell you I'm going to have an answer for everything. Just use your best judgment when looking at this stuff. If if I ran a Carnival meter over this table, there's probably 3 that are fake. That one, the weird D512. I think we said this looked okay. Maybe just the 2. Oh, and the 62 smooth base. And the D990s, yeah, this one seemed, I think the front one here seemed kind of dark. And you can see it's not really drips, but you can see deeper coloring spotted around the base. So that's suspicious. Yeah, if you guys didn't hear Bill, he was saying he had somebody offer him a piece that he says he's had for 25 years, but it's 2024 now, so 25 years get you back to 1999. And this stuff was being post-production in the early 70s. Hemingray 43s, I believe that's yours in the back row, right, Bill? This one's got dirt in the drip points. So it could very well be legitimate, especially when I show you the dump one we dug up. This is Roger Lucas's. Much darker, but it wasn't, you know, you have that range. We talked about the TS's. There's that 20 in the front row from the NIA auction. When I first saw that piece, Bill and I talked to, we were under the assumption that all the legitimate Hemingray 20s that came from Ottawa, Canada, were all 04 period. This is a 04 period. This is a 04 period. 04 period. 04 period. They're all 04 periods except the one that was in the NIA auction. And it's very well carnivalized on the top. You can tell the other ones are kind of light on the top. So we felt in the interest of the NIA, and I think Darryl was on our side, that let's just pull that piece from the auction.
What's the date code on that?
This one?
Yeah.
No date code.
Okay.
So it actually fits the Carnival era, but all of them that we know that came down were all those. Unless there's another line somewhere, but again, the dark coloring, yeah. There's some sort of residue on the inner skirt. I don't know if that's a little too much spray. That little chip might be carnivalized over. That would be a good indicator that it was post. The next piece is mine. Hemingray 109. I bought a collection 15 miles from my house, and this was in there. At first I said, oh, that's fake. Kind of got the little drippy stuff here. So there is wear around the open pinhole on the top, and there's no date code, so it fits the right time frame. But I know that collector bought stuff from the same dealer who did the carnivalized Mickey Mouses. So that's why I think it's a non-legit one. Even though that collector states he only did 257s and a couple 19s. His business partner would pick up the insulators from Wapakoneta, Ohio, and bring them back. So it's very possible his business partner went out on his own and did the same thing with other CDs that we don't know about. Or maybe the memory of that collector that did the Mickeys is not quite there yet. But
Bob, that one would have had a punch button on it, right?
it would have.
Yeah.
And
If somebody did it after the fact, then the Carnival would have covered the pinch.
take a look at it.
Yeah. Almost looks like somebody did some grinding there.
It almost looks like somebody purposely ground out the top
Exactly.
to make it look like it had line wear.
Yep.
So what Bill was relating is a story I also heard. The same collector who did the 257s, Mickey Mouses, was buying up lots of clear glass, ice blue glass, to make sure they had the right date codes. So There could be more fakes out there than what I think there are on this table. It's how much money do you want to part with? Mickey Mouses are going for over $100, right? Are they like 200 now? Yeah. So, 19, similar to the 20s. We do have a few ranges there because the 19s were not only used in Ottawa, they were used all over central Kansas. Mine came from Hutchinson, Kansas. I felt mine was legitimate. Mine was a 04, no period. The one that came from Ottawa, Canada to the show, no date code at all. So I put it pre the second half of 1933 back to 31, so somewhere in that time frame, assuming this is legitimate, which I think it is. 04, no period. 04, no period, another nice dark one. There's some little nicks. I'm not going to say that sometimes it didn't happen at the factory, but that are carnivalized over. That one's mine. Another 04. So they're all 04s except for the one that supposedly came from Ottawa. This one I set aside. This is someone who shall remain nameless in this room. Date code 38 and 3 dots. Look at the dome. They didn't really get the dome. You would think that would be a legit piece because it seems to be sprayed from the bottom. But I don't know of any insulators that were made that late in Carnival coming from the Hemingray factory. I did just have a conversation with Mr. Klingensmith, who did claim he had one in his auction in the last 20 years that came from a collector that claimed it was original, and it was a 38 code. That would be an outlier if that is true. 42s. I have two 42s. I couldn't get to them either. Luckily, people brought a bunch. 0 only. Pretty worn. Some chips. No code at all. No code at all. No code at all. Big number on the back. Somebody was asking about the big numbers online. 0 only.
So Bob, what about those big numbers on the back?
Those only seem to be on the insulators maybe for 33 because they don't show up on any of the 04 or 0. This is a 0 piece, doesn't have it.
Strictly on the 42?
Yeah, the big mold number.
Okay.
They all seem okay. I have a light one at home that's a 04 period. Kind of question. The other one I have I got from a gentleman who bought it in Muncie. It's almost pristine. It's dark, no date code at all. I suspect that's one of those pieces that came home with the factory workers. It happens every few years, something pops up like that. This one I set over here, 04 2 dots. Mold 42A. Look at how shiny that is. 1 year later, wrong date code in my opinion. These last few pieces, I think for the most part, it's obvious. This is a much later carnivalized coating that Hemingray did, actually Kimball at that time. There's two versions of this light color and then one that's almost black. It's the radio treatment for the top. That's a legit one. It's just a different color that they chose. But I've never seen one of these before. There's another Kimball 830. This is 1956 date code. I would bet anything this is post-production. This one I think somebody spray painted or gilded. It's an 8 and 3 dots. I've not seen one of those before. Okay, I know who this is. What does the note say? Gold plated. These were sprayed by a Libby glass employee. If you guys didn't know, Libby was a division of Owens, Illinois. The one they did with water tumblers did mostly 42s and other styles. So that would be post-production. That might be the same guy that started it all, because that guy was in Toledo at Owens. I'll ask the dealer if he knew if the name rings a bell. 45. Actually, it's Armstrong. Somebody coded this, I think. I can't speak for much knowledge on Armstrong, but it doesn't look right to me. This one, I think, was, have you seen those people that are like painting them with auto paint?
Oh yeah, it's dripping off.
You can see it dripping off the bottom of the insulator.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's.
These Pyrexes, the back row here, those all look fake, maybe even either stained or stained. Stained, that's a Hemingray 17. That's looks like a Carnival. Carnival-ish. It's got a lot of wear on it, but it's a Pyrex. I don't think those are legit, but I'm not going to rule on that. The Hemingray 9, you know, this is done over aqua, like those. It's really splotchy. I'd like to know the story on that one. This first glance, these seem okay. Even the dark ones, there's dirt on it, on top of the Carnival. This one's obviously seen some stress, but again, it's got dirt and stuff on it. I don't think there's anything wrong. Let's take a look at this one. This one's fake. Look at the chip. You can see the Carnival right over that big chip on the bottom.
So, play the devil's advocate on that. What about a chip occurring coming out of the mold and then being carnivalized?
They wouldn't come out chipped like that. I mean, it's got 3 big chips.
Okay.
The quality control would not let that through.
Okay.
Even if it went through the carnivalization process, they still had inspectors and packers at the end of the line putting them in boxes, and they would have seen that. And yeah.
I believe most of it probably been caught when the guy pulling it out of the mold. They normally put it under flame to kind of polish it a little bit. They probably would have caught it right there, and if it was bad, they would have just put it in the water and dumped it. So that's what Mosser does now. If something comes out of the mold and they don't like it, they put it in a bunch of water, it's cracked, and they dispose of it.
So it doesn't get confused with regular.
Yep. Like I said, it's put in cold water. Most of them shatter right there in a big. It's kind of a trash bin.
But I think all the Hemingray CDs are represented that we know are legit, plus possibly this fake one here and the Mickeys. Obviously there's a lot more Pyrex styles. And Pyrex did carnivalize into the 40s. I know those suspensions have early 1940s dates on them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, since somebody brought this piece with the carnivalized top, there's a series of insulators that aren't represented here. I didn't even think about it till I got here. And that's the high tops, the 660s, 670s, and 680s. Those have some of those have the radio treated top, which looks like that really dark black Carnival coating. They would have only done the very top. They wouldn't have done anything more than that.
They did pinholes.
And they did the pinhole as well.
Bob, for the folks watching the video, especially who may not know, why would you carnivalize glass? Just so that that's clear.
To take a $1 insulator to a $30 or $50 insulator, or in the case of the Mickeys, those are going for 200 and up now.
But why did they make them
Originally?
Yeah.
Mostly for radio interference purposes. Back in the days when you only had AM radio and you drove under the power lines, you'd get that hiss and static.
Did it work?
I believe it did work. The TS series were done to control dirt. They felt that the dirt would collect less quickly on the metallic coated insulator than a regular line insulator, because most of those were used along the railroad. I picked up that small collection that had that 1070 Hemingray 109 in it. Unless the owner hadn't told me who he bought some insulators for in the past, we would have no provenance on that piece, whether it was legit or not. And it fit the right date codes and everything. Collectors die and their spouse doesn't know anything. If I kick the bucket and this D510 is in my collection, are you going to think it's legit? Because I've been in the hobby for 30 some years. I don't know. Go ahead.
So you think that the guy from Chicago only did 2 CDs?
That's what he claims.
Really?
But he claims there could have been two or three other people that were doing stuff that he doesn't know what they did.
I talked to Mike Guthrie, so Mike Guthrie did a book on fake and altered insulators, and he covered a lot of different methodologies that were used. And for carnivals, for Hemingray, he listed several that were highly suspicious, which was 154, 162, 164, and 168 and 230. So the guy from Chicago only claims to be one of those, and there's an awful lot of those other ones.
There could be.
I always thought the guy from Chicago did the works.
That's not what he claims. But like I said, I've heard stories about people selling him boxes of clear and ice blue stuff.
Yeah.
So, the takeaway here is the brass bush is pretty much a safe bet, because chances are the insulators would have cracked when they were reheated post-production. The TS's, there wouldn't be a non-carnivalized one.
Why would you trust the word of a person who fakes insulators?
I'm just reiterating the story.
Okay.
Oh, I would think if you admitted you did 2 and you really did 3, why wouldn't you just say you did 3?
50.
Yeah. No, but I mean, if I already admit, if I'm already guilty, it's like I've done 257s and I've done 168. Why wouldn't you also say, well, I did 162s and 164?
He's done other things he hasn't talked about.
Well,
You have to remember, this collector owned an electrical contracting business and had a contract to remove the Mickeys from Chicago L train lines, and 80% of them were clear.
Barrels full.
Barrels. I remember going to shows where there were 5-gallon buckets on an entire 3 sales tables of Mickeys. They were dirty. So you had to clean them before you could then send them to get carnivalized. So there was time involved doing all that.
It seems like a lot of labor involved in cleaning them, sending them in, paying somebody else to do the work, and then turning around.
And driving over there, picking them up, bringing them back, and then selling them.
And I wonder what the cost was if you bought one back in the day when these were first made. Did you ever document that?
I did not.
I can't imagine it being much more than $25.
I was going to say probably 30, 35. That's my guess.
Yeah. And I do remember him telling me that he would take, I think it was 3 clears. You gave him 3 clears and you would get a Carnival. That was the trade.
Okay.
That's how he was accessing clears, clean clears. So he was actually at one point looking for clears. It wasn't like he had a bunch of, at his disposal.
It's just a powder anyway.
It's a tin oxide, so it's microns thin.
I just remember catalogs from the 70s
that came out of Chicago with car parts and stuff, and they used to have in that catalog material that you could buy, carnivalized glass.
How many do you think production were made on the Carnival Mickeys? Were 1,000 made?
They were done for a number of years. I have no idea.
Any idea? Hundreds?
Hundreds, I'm sure. I don't know if it got to 1,000 or not.
What year was the Mickey made?
The Mickeys were made all the way back in the 1890s up through about 1945.
What's the temperature going, do you know?
I didn't ask that.
But you had to, because they'd have to heat the insulators up too. That was another part of the process.
Well, you also got a huge amount of lost product. What you were saying is you would send 4 clear insulators to be carnivalized, and you get 1 or 2 back that didn't crack, even without the brass bushing.
So what about a piece that has the brass bushing and is cracked?
It's either had a hard life or it's gone through post-carnival production.
What's the story on this one?
Everything that Bob is talking about, this is all guesswork.
This is my opinion, not necessarily the NIA's stance.
And I'm not just doing that for a disclaimer for the NIA, but I'm just saying all we're doing is guesswork because none of us were alive back then. Most of us weren't, anyways. So, anyways, I'm not talking about you, Les. So this is all just guesswork. That's all we can do. And the reason we were doing this is just try to raise your awareness on the possibilities.
I mean, I've seen Hemingray 9 107s in Carnival. I've seen, I think, a TS and the 129 possibly in Carnival. I mean, there's other pieces I've seen. They're not here, obviously. We didn't ask for people to bring every CD they had.
And a few Aqua Mickeys. I don't know if you mentioned that. I've seen some Aqua Mickeys that were carnivalized.
Have you?
Yes.
That would fall in line with the 9 probably.
Yeah.
And what's the story on this one here? Is that the CD1?
That's the 118. Yeah. That got a outside copper skirt on it.
So they would carnivalize it and then put the copper skirt over?
Yeah, that bottom is threaded on the outside. Okay. Would thread on. Just like these have the copper threaded in the skirt, and these had the glass insert that was cemented up in there.
And the purpose of the copper was for what?
Part of the keeping the insulator clean, and so it wouldn't arc over or whatever. Because these were telecommunication.
They were used along the coast, so it had something to do with fog too, I think.
I'm sure. Yeah. The fog and dirt on the insulator didn't work well together.
Because that's a pretty valuable insulator right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
When they were doing the process, they weren't calling it carnivalizing.
No, it was.
Because carnivalization came when they started putting it on regular glass and handing it out at the carnivals, right?
Right. The term carnivalizing is a generic term that we came up with. It's a metallic coating, often tin oxide.
And Carnival glass came out at a later date when they were giving away glass that had that same coating at carnivals.
Actually, it was before. It was turn of the century up to about the 20s, and then they stopped. So maybe there was a good salesman that said, well, I'm not doing dishes anymore. Maybe I can sell some more tin oxide to an insulator company.
I thought it was depression at the time.
Way, yeah.
It still went on, but it wasn't as popular.